Cardfight Vanguard celebrates its 15th year anniversary next year, and throughout the history of this game, there have been a lot of mechanics. In today's video, we are going to rate every single one of Vanguard's unique game mechanics. Let's take a look. So they put every single universal mechanic from Vanguard in this, and I feel like this is a very good idea. What's really cool is that we can talk about the history of the game while also talking about more recent things and how they compare. So let's just get into it. My criteria for this will be overall how good it was. I think it's kind of hard to say like how good it was for the game. It's a mix of how good it was for the game plus what I personally feel about that mechanic, but I also just want to talk about things over time. So of course, everyone knows what a perfect guard is. Perfect guard are of course sentinels that you can only play 4 of in a deck that let you discard 1 to stop an attack. And it's actually like, I think this is quite a staple thing, like something that makes Vanguard stand out. Because when One Piece came out and copied so much of Vanguard's mechanics, the one thing it didn't copy was perfect guards. And when you play One Piece, like the only thing that is similar is blockers, and that's like a very Bandai card game feel. So I always like the fact that it's like you always have this like ability to stop an attack that you have to account for. And you know, for almost 15 years we've played Vanguard, and the whole thing of like checking your opponent's drop to see how many PGs they've used and whatnot has really stayed consistent throughout all the years. So I think perfect guard is like, it's definitely not like at the very top, but it feels like it's such a, it's like one of the most important parts of the game. So for me, it feels like it's kind of pretty high up here, and it feels like it really like, it adds to the back and forth of the game. So for that reason, I feel like PGs are always good. Forerunner, this is something that new Vanguard players will not know about. So Forerunners are types of starters. They were grade 0 starting Vanguards that when you ride over them, they would move to a rearguard circle and they would have their own effects. So these were really cool because they added a whole dimension into deck building where obviously since V series, all the starters do the same thing where, I mean, since D, they all just draw you a card when you go second. Back in V, they all drew you a card, and they also got some other effects down the line too. But Forerunners were really cool because they gave flavor to every single deck that like, it felt like even your starter, which was the only thing that you could put face down before the game started, now you have the whole ride deck, could like add to that. Whereas now I guess because of the ride deck, maybe they feel like the ride deck replaced Forerunner instead. So I personally really liked Forerunner. I feel like it was a cool part of deck building, and to me, it felt like a very signature thing that Vanguard had that I'm kind of surprised got removed like that. So I miss Forerunners. I think every old boomer Vanguard player misses Forerunners too. And so I think that shouldn't be too big of a surprise. Mega Blast is another one. So I think a lot of this first row is going to be things that old players, like newer players don't know. Mega Blast was Counterblast 5, Soul Blast 8 abilities. And so you basically had to like fill up resources throughout the entire game, not use your effects just to satisfy this one effect. And it's like they had the OTT one was like draw 5. This one was like restand everything, including the Vanguard. This was Mr. Invincible. They made them cheaper in Vanguard 0, which made it kind of cool, I guess. But even then they weren't that good. So overall, should the game not have had them in the first place? Not really. It was kind of like an interesting thing to build around. And you always had, like, there were moments at locals when I was a high school student where, like, you know, some guy would actually build around Mr. Invincible and like win with it, right? And it'd be like so hype, right? So it contributed some cool moments to the game. So it's definitely not like a bad mechanic in terms of like health for the game, but in terms of like how good it is, it's pretty whatever. And some Mega Blasts were so bad. Some Mega Blasts were literally horrible. Like Vortex Dragon Ute was a really bad one, I remember. And then some of them were Axe, some of them were on hits. I like the on hit ones, but yeah, because the on hits were at least pressure. But I don't know. Otherwise, it just felt like they wanted to make these like quest decks, but they were way too overcosted. A Special Intercept. This, I wouldn't put this here. I would put like triggers instead. So I feel like this shouldn't be on the tier list to begin with. A Special Intercept literally meant effects that activate when you intercept with something. We still have cards like that are like, if you intercepted with this, or if this was put from rearguard to guardian circle, activate effect. This feels like it shouldn't be on the list. It's not really like a mechanic, I guess. Just feels kind of weird. Ride Chain. This is another one that's people might confuse this with Ride Deck or Ride Line. Ride Chains. Back in Vanguard before the D series started, if you didn't, so like you couldn't choose a ride deck. All you could choose was your grade 0, and everything else you had to ride from your hand. So you had different kinds of ride chains. You had ones that were like, if you ride the grade 1 over the grade 0, you can search your deck for the grade 2. And then the grade 1 would let you pitch any grade 3 to search for the grade 3 as well. And then you had Tsukuyomi, who would let you every turn, start of turn, look at top 5 for the grade 1 that you should be riding. And then that would let you ride it from the top 5. And then that would, the grade 1 and the grade 2 would do that as well. And then there was also the Spectral Duke one that was like, on ride, look at top 7 for the grade 2 or the grade 3. And then the grade 2 would do some effect when ridden or ridden over, I think. So they were kind of cool because they felt themed. So obviously like the Blaster Dark ride chain feels very famous. The Spectral Duke one was of course very, very strong as well. And some of them felt very, very powerful during their times. Like the Spectral Duke ride line was one of the best because it gave you free resources in a like era of Vanguard where resources were very expensive. So getting like top deck call for free or like retire 1 call 2 for free compared to like CB2 to call 1 or CB3 to call 1 felt very, very good. So ride chains overall, I think, since I'm a boomer, I would put them here, but overall they were kind of average. The really bad part of ride chains was like, if you whiffed it, it would do nothing. And some of the grade 0s, the later ride chains said, if you ride the wrong grade 1, they would call themselves, the grade 0 would call itself out. So that would be cool because in decks that like have self-retire, you could at least self-retire. But then in like the Blaster Dark ride chain, if you rode the wrong grade 1, the grade 0 did nothing. It was literally just nothing. They fixed that in Vanguard 0, I think, where they let you like try to find the right one or something like that. Vanguard 0 patched up a lot of the issues of old, like really, really old Vanguard card design. So ride chain was cool. Then cross ride. Cross ride, we have something similar. The new Azel in set 9 is kind of a cross ride where it basically cross ride meant like an evolved form of a grade 3. So all that cross ride did was give plus 2k power permanently. So 11k was like the baseline. It was either 10k, all grade 3s were 10k or 11k back then. And then cross ride would turn them into 13k basically. Cross rides, when you describe it like that, it doesn't sound that impressive. But in the anime, it was so cool. It was like, oh my god, I can't believe this, my favorite card has an evolution. And then you'd be like, oh my god, I can't wait for when Tsukuyomi gets her cross ride, and then she never got one. You know, so everyone was like hoping that their favorite grade 3 would get a cross ride. It became like this like really big point of hype. So I feel like it was really good. Also, like the 13k power was very strong because the game, early Vanguard was based around making magic columns that could hit for 16k or 21k and forcing out your opponent's hand by making them guard those numbers. But when things became 13k, then 16k attack suddenly became from 10k to guard, became 5k to guard. And that obviously made those decks become stronger. So decks like Phantom Blaster Overlord were good just because they drew a bunch of cards and they could guard easily with a 13k base that they could go into on turn 3 because they had ways to put the original grade 3 into Soul. So, I feel like Cross Ride, I don't want to put too high. It's kind of similar as Ride Chain, where it was good at its time, but in the long term, when you think about like flashiness of mechanics and like how like original and epic and cool something could have been, it didn't feel that flashy, I guess. So I feel like this is like me looking back, right, 15 years later at Cross Ride. If this was a question like 10 years ago, probably would have put it here, but right now it's like, yeah, it's like it was fine. Persona Blast was kind of interesting. You'll notice that there was this like there's a lot of ride based things in the game, right? I think the Vanguard card designers were constantly thinking of how do we make the remaining grade 3s in our players' decks be worth something. So initially they would make cards that would have effects on both the Vanguard and the Regard Circle, like the original Draconic Overlord, right? And then they made cross rides. They were like, well, you want to run this grade 3 because you need it in the soul to use the new grade 3 that's really good, right? And then they made Persona Blast, which was like, well, now you need extra copies of this grade 3 to use the effect, right? And it was like, well, that's kind of cool. But the problem was is that if that card was really good, that means you needed 4 copies of this really expensive card. And that's kind of like, you know, when you, like, when grade 3 main boss units are pricey in modern day Vanguard, it all kind of comes back to Persona Blast, I feel like, because that was like the first time when the game designers were like, well, you need 4 of this. And not just because you want to ride into it, because sometimes in other decks you could search things, but now it's like you need 4 of it because you need the extra copy to do something. And that Persona part became the entire defining mechanic of Vanguard as we know it today, right? So Persona Blast itself was basically you had to discard a copy of the Vanguard to use an effect, and pictured as the best of them all, which is the end. Persona Blast is kind of similar as Cross Ride. They go together because they were introduced at the same time. I feel like they were average. They don't feel like for me, looking back as a high schooler, it was pain because I didn't have any money and I had to get 4 of these cards, right? So it just felt kind of like it was something cool they were trying to do with extra cards, extra grade 3s, but overall I wasn't like super impressed. Limit Break. Limit Break is technically in standard, not as a keyword, but Gabulius is basically Limit Break. Limit Break means that if you have 4 or more damage, you can use this effect. That's literally all it is. They basically introduced this thing where they were like, well, we want you to be able to use certain effects only when we get to the late game. And it's cool, but then they also made cards that give you damage, and then you could self-damage yourself and heal them back at the end of the turn to activate your limit breaks, because what happened is that people were not giving each other damage. So both players would stay at 3 to not give each other a limit break. So then they introduced grade 1s that said your limit break 4 can be used at limit break 3 or less, which kind of asked the question, what was the point of limit break in the first place? I personally speaking don't look back at limit break that positively either. Again, for context, I've played this game since day 1, so I was around for I played all these metas. I literally have never quit Vanguard. I've played since the beginning. Limit Break also goes in a sort of average pool here for me as well, but Ultimate Break was basically Limit Break 5. So if you were at 5 damage, you could use this effect. So it was literally like a last second comeback mechanic. And then, so they made them somewhat good. Like Glory Maelstrom was obviously like as a guard restrict, so that was quite strong back in the day, and it was the first of its kind. But some other limit breaks like Platinasal were kind of like, or like they would just make better versions of effects as ultimate breaks, so like Vermilion. So it was like, and that was, yeah, like they didn't do much with ultimate break either. So almost feels like they could have lived without it. I feel like ultimate break didn't really feel necessary. They could have just like put Persona Blast instead, I feel like. So it's either here or there. I feel like it's kind of whatever. It's like, I feel like they could be doing more with this concept. I don't think it doesn't need to exist, but I think the idea of you can only use this effect when you're at 5 damage is actually quite cool, but it shouldn't be a card's whole identity. That was the problem with these, that they were cross rides whose whole identity was Limit Break 5. But if you make a boss unit that has multiple effects, and then the very last one is Limit Break 5, do something super comebacky, that's pretty cool. Like, what if Divine Skills could only be used when you're at 5 damage, right? That would be pretty cool. So, but moving on. Ultimate Break I'll put in C. It's not completely unnecessary, but it was pretty whatever. Break Ride. Break Ride, as you can see, we're in the break era here. So Break Ride basically said that if you're on 4 damage and you ride over this card, you activate a Break Ride effect. And they were very good. They were very explosive. They were things like call something from deck, and they all gave plus 10k to the Vanguard. So they would give plus 10k to the new Vanguard, and they would do an extra effect. So they would like call stuff, lock stuff, retire stuff, restand. They were the Kagero one, restood your Vanguard, which was one of the most best aged break rides of all time. And then, of course, my favorite card of all time is a break ride. Daikaiser is this category. He gives a crit 10k and the ability to break your opponent's guardians when you check a grade 3. So just off of that, you probably think I love break rides, but honestly, it's kind of in this area again where I feel like break rides are, I like them because they were more explosive, and I feel like they had more flavor. Like the limit breaks just kind of felt like they were, you know, there was like the first test of, okay, how are we gonna make these effects be worth being at 4 damage, right? But then with break rides, they were like, okay, we'll really give you a payoff for being on 4 damage. And they made them interesting. I think the biggest thing for me with break ride is that the cards were interesting. You had like I mentioned Daikaiser, but you had like Chat Noir, which was a really cool one. Like I literally built Great Nature for the first time because that thing was like, you would give, what was it? A buff to the Vanguard that was like every time your rearguard attacks, you give 4k to something, and then when it dies, you draw 1 or something. So it was like, that was quite cool. They explored with like guard restricts. Yeah, Mordred was like, you know, call a card. Dauntless Drive was like, I feel like they put some really flashy effects on break rides, which is why I remember them a bit better than limit breaks. I feel like limit breaks were a little bit, I don't know, a little bit like underwhelming. It's also why like Ultimate Break 2 is like, the best Ultimate Break I think is Glendios, because Glendios was like, it's exactly what I described, where it's like you had a limit break 4 effect, a non-limit break effect, and a limit break 5 effect, right? And then with break rides, it was like, it gave you this cool flashy payoff for you know, riding over 4 damage. The only problem is that, again, it was this like kind of like waiting game of like both players just stay on 3 damage without giving each other the 4th. And that's why like some people would just like ride into their Chaos Breaker immediately. But then if you didn't break ride Chaos Breaker, he would feel a lot worse. So it added this fun dimension to the game. So I feel like I'll put break rides over limit break. Cross break ride was, it combined this and this. So they were like evolved forms of break rides. So you not only got the break ride, but you also got a cross ride. So were there any good cross break rides? Just Drag Ruler, I guess. Drag Ruler was good for a moment. Oh, Ganslot, true. Ganslot was pretty decent. Oh, Minerva was a cross break ride, huh? Good point. Rebirth. Okay, now you guys are reminding me. There was more than I remembered. I was just remembering the first set. Because they were just upgraded forms of the break rides, it was like fine. The cool thing of break rides is that you could ride anything over them and they would give the effect to anything that you ride over them. The cross rides were like, well, you have to put 1 and 2 together. And the worst part was, if you rode the cross break ride form of a break ride first, you would just lose all the good parts of that effect. So it's like, you didn't get the 10k buff to the Vanguard. You didn't get whatever other bonus effect you got either. So it's like they made the cross break ride for Daikaiser later as well. And that was also just like, it's kind of like, without the original Daikaiser, it loses a lot of its pressure. It's just an extra drive check. So it felt kind of mid. So I don't know, kind of put it together with Ultimate Break, I think. Just felt a little bit unfortunate. Lock, this is a big one. I'm kind of curious, Chad, where would you put Lock? Lock, of course, is in standard. Artisaria carries it into standard. Wow, F, S, C, A, crazy. B, C, a lot of Fs. Lots of people hate Lock, it seems. So Lock, in case you don't know, basically turns one of your rear guards face down, and it does not turn face up again until the end of your turn, or the owner's turn. And then you cannot overcall it. That circle just becomes void, and you cannot do anything with it. This started off kind of chill, kind of like Artisaria now, where it's just like, you know, it locks for a turn, you lose that circle, but nothing really happens to it. But they took it really, really far, and they would, you know, very quickly it was like, oh, if something unlocks, draw a card and retire that thing. And then you can lock your opponent's cards from hand. You can lock your opponent's damage. It's like you can lock lock from top deck. So even if you counterplayed lock, they would still lock you. I feel like right now Lock with Artisaria is like a very healthy lock. So I feel like they're trying to remedy it a little bit. In the grand scheme of things, I think it's kind of here. I think it's way too... Definitely should not be like, this shouldn't have existed. Just because I think they've shown in standard that they can make it balanced. But it overall is a pretty negative gameplay experience. I personally if I had to put it somewhere myself, I probably would put it here. Just because I don't hate it, I don't love it. I think when balanced right, it's a fun thing to play around, and it's a risk and return. And Vanguard, a lot of Vanguard is about risk and return that I think is just kind of cool. And as long as they make it so that the locks have enough detriment, I think it's cool. So I think Artisaria right now is like one of the best designs of Lock. So I'll put it somewhere in the middle. Quint Wall, I think a lot of people don't know what this one is. This was another type of Sentinel, much like Perfect Guards, that you cannot master one when you guard with this, and you put the top 5 cards of your deck into your Guardian zone. So this would take up the same slot of your deck as a Perfect Guard. So you have to choose if you play like 2 Perfect Guards into Quint Walls. There was a time where you played 4 Quint Walls, which was Legion. So I think we should reverse these two. Let's talk about Legion first. Legion is a mechanic that was just brought back to standard, so the new players should know what it is now. But it allowed you to return 4 cards from your drop zone back to your deck and search your deck for a Legion mate and put that on your Vanguard circle. So you had 2 cards on the Vanguard circle. They would combine their attack power when they attacked, and you could use both of their Vanguard circle effect as well. And you could put back any 4 cards as well. D-Legion is a nerf version of that. Legion allows you to choose any 4 cards. Legion is probably some of the most broken game design in Vanguard's history because there were just so many unnecessary interactions. There was a Nova Grappler deck where the Legion was a grade 3 and a grade 2, but a card called Cat Butler existed, which said when your grade 2 Vanguard attack doesn't hit, you retire Cat Butler to restand your Vanguard with no downsides, right? So what you would do is you get your opponent to 5, and then you keep swinging with the Vanguard that doesn't hit, and it keeps restanding as you keep popping your Cat Butlers. And the reason why it was insane is that you could ride the grade 3 again next turn, Legion back the Cat Butlers, and then just draw them out, and then use that effect again. But the most broken part was basically Thingsaver Abyss, which back in the day you could mix clans. So you would basically have a Shadow Paladin Legion and a Royal Paladin Legion that both restood the Vanguard. And so you could just basically do a bunch of restanding Vanguard attacks non-stop every turn, and it just was very unhealthy. But overall, I think it was kind of cool because it explored this new design space in Vanguard that we never had before, and obviously they thought it was cool enough to bring back, so first time in forever. And the other cool thing about Legion is that in the long run it was cool. The Legion era of the game wasn't fun. I think it was quite problematic because there were so many broken decks, but in the long run they used Legion as a way to bring back old decks, which also led to some broken decks down the line, such as the Cross, which legioned with the End, which is one of the best overlords in the whole, history of Vanguard. But, they made some cool stuff, like they made the Daikaiser Legion, right? The Daikaiser Legion was really good for a long time, and that was really cool as well, right? So, like, one of the most favorite, like fan favorite, famous units of all time is the Bluish Flames. And that's also a Legion that people really, really love. So I feel like Legion's a mixed bag. I think it's kind of like Break Ride for me, where the flashiness of it was really cool. I give style points for a lot. So Break Ride got a lot of style points, that's why it's an A. Legion gets style points, that's why it's an A. I don't think it's a game-defining mechanic, obviously, but I had my fun with it, and I'm also lucky that Dimension Police combined these two mechanics into a really good deck. You had a Break Ride Legion deck where you would basically turtle around and wait till your opponent puts you on 4, and then you'd ride a Legion over your Break Ride. That's what's cool about Break Ride, is that it worked with any grade 3 that you rode over it, so it worked with the Legions too. But as you probably heard, Legion needed you to have 4 cards in drop to work. And what got 4 cards in drop? A Quint Wall. So you use a Quint Wall to put the top 5 cards of your deck into your Guardian zone, and then you Legion them back. So even if you put a bunch of triggers in there, you put all those triggers back and you get to guard with them. But that was literally the only function of Quint Wall. It was never really used again. Could we have lived without it? Maybe, but it was useful at one point, so therefore we couldn't. At one point, the Quint Wall was actually used and it was decent. And that was the only time. So that was literally, this is just the first lettered era of Vanguard. So of course we have the base era, G era, V era, and D era that we are in right now. This is all the mechanics just from the base era. So you can kind of see. Then we get 5 mechanics for G. Then we get 6 mechanics for V. No, sorry, we get, 5, and then 5 for V. And then we have, quite a lot actually. We have 10 for D, but D is also the longest, so that makes sense. So moving on to G, we have the, of course, titulary Stride era and also the Stride keyword. So this is also in standard, so you guys should know what this is. You discard a copy of a grade 3 or anything that's up to grade 3 to choose a card from your G zone and stride it. You have a temporal form of your Vanguard that you can switch between a whole toolbox of extra deck cards to go into depending on what the game requires. Some decks, some clans were spoiled in that they had actual strides that could adapt to different situations. You know, you had ones that called stuff out, you had other ones that buffed stuff on your board, right? And that was really cool. Overall, well, the beginning was a little bit rough because there weren't many strides, and you know, a lot of clans didn't have strides for their first year of G. It overall became a very much loved form, like not just like format, it was a very much loved mechanic. That is the reason why, I mean, I think Kai mentioned this as well, it's the reason why premium exists. People love Stride so much, they want to keep striding forever, and that's why premium as a format continues to exist, and that's why Stride is an S. Stride, I like Stride a lot. I was a broke college student during G, so I couldn't build a lot of the decks that I wanted to build during G, but it just felt cool that you had a main grade 3 Vanguard that gave effects to these strides. So it's very similar to break rides. So I kind of wish that stride bearers were kind of included in this too, but I guess it goes with strides. But Stride was just really, really cool. Just having like effects that you could toolbox into was really nice. The only downside was your G zone was often more expensive than your main deck because these cards were used in, you know, every clan. If you had a generic stride that every deck in the clan wanted to use, then, well, every deck in that clan is going to want to use it. So some strides were very expensive, and they had a horrible rarity called GR that were very hard to pull and very expensive. So that was also not a very good thing. But that's just like, I think that's just part of Vanguard's history. Very expensive eras as well. That's also why now, since the D era started, we don't have any rarities higher, any base rarities higher than triple rare for the most part. Generation Break came with Stride. It basically meant for every face-up card in your G zone, you'd be able to unlock multiple effects. It was kind of there to reward games scaling, but it also became a thing where I don't want to give my opponent Generation Break effects, or I don't want to give my opponent first Stride, so I'm going to stay on grade 2 forever. So overall, I don't have as much of a positive outlook on Generation Break. I think it was fine to have because it allowed them to sort of gate certain mechanics beyond certain stages of the game. And obviously, like strides especially were Generation Break gated. But overall, I think G became more fun in the last year when they started doing less effects that had Generation Break restrictions. So they could make turn 2 and turn 3 a bit more, especially turn 3, a little bit more impactful. Which is like why current Vanguard is fun, is because you can, a lot of the cards work the moment they're played. So I think that makes it pretty interesting. Then G Assist. So in original Vanguard, we didn't have a ride deck, which meant that if you don't have the right grade to ride up in your hand, then you, back in the day, you just had to eat shit, basically. Like it was just like, well, can't do anything, I pass, right? It's like I just swing Vanguard pass. Then they introduced G Assist, which said you can show your hand to your opponent so they can see that you don't have the right grade, and then you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you find the right grade, you add it to your hand, but then you have to banish 2 cards from your hand and 2 cards from your G zone as cost for that. So it's quite heavy, but at least it saved you from bricking. I overall, in terms of ways to patch up ride missing, I think the ride deck is far better, and the cost was pretty expensive. It's not like a, I feel like I'm just over-polluting B. It's like a C. I don't really, it's not a mechanic per se. It's not a thing you wanted to do in a game. It was just a patch. It was basically just a patch to make the gameplay experience less bad. And that's just kind of how it was. Yeah, we can put I see. It's good that like people were happy when it was introduced, right? When it was introduced, people were like, finally, I don't have to be breaking. It's like so good. But overall, I think it's, looking back at it, because we have the ride deck now, we can look back at it and go like, oh, actually it wasn't that great. G Assist to a PG, yeah, that was not very fun, but that it was what it was. Generation Guard. This, I'm just gonna put an S and then explain it. This is one of my favorite mechanics of all time in Vanguard. This was basically a card in your G zone that you couldn't stride, but it said you can discard a heal trigger from your hand to access another part of your G zone, which was the defensive part. Every G Guardian had 15k shield base. Heal triggers at the time only had 10k shield base, so they were already an upgrade. You could only use them when both players were on grade 3, so you couldn't use them early. But when you went into a G Guard, they had their own effects. So you had things like Denial Griffin for Kagura, which like let you retire your opponent's attacking rear guard, which was insane, right? Being able to have battle phase disruption was so cool. And then, you know, Spangled Tears picture let you like draw a bajillion cards, one of like the only banned G Guards, I think. And then, you know, they made so many different ones. But what was really cool is that these were new defensive mechanics. It was the first, I think the first ever instance of defensive creep in Vanguard, where they finally, to counteract all the plus power, you know, aggression in the game, they made a defensive mechanic. Now, the downside was that you could only go into this 4 times per game maximum, but then it was, they introduced like, they patched up decks just with G Guards basically, and they made it, the whole game feel such a cool back and forth that even guarding could pop off effects. Grand Blue is the biggest example of this, where Grand Blue literally would go into combos off of a G Guard, right? And that's just such a cool thing. That's both the good and the bad part of G era, is that people like me like that side of the game, that it was like you had complex things to do, lots of combos and stuff to learn. But then obviously other people they quit the game because of that, because they're like, well, this game's too complex for me to keep up. I have a 9 to 5. I have to, you know, feed my family, and you want me to learn combos when I just want to chill and play this game? That's why current Vanguard is so popular, is because it, you know, it's more appealing to that crowd. But G Guards to me were really fun. I was a college student, I had a lot of time, so obviously I love G Guards. But finally, the last G era mechanic was Ultimate Stride. These were strides that you had to pitch, discard a card that is the exact same name as your Vanguard for cost, and you had to have already had, what, 2 face-up cards in G-Zone? 3 face-up cards in G-Zone? I can't remember. But Ultimate Strides, they were nation-based, so this was the first time that nations were introduced as a card. 3, right? Yeah, 3. So you had to like basically like stride in G-Guard or something if you wanted to go into this as like your second stride. Each nation had their own one, and that's why they were super expensive when they released, because, you know, Link Joker, Nova Grappler, and Dimension Police all had to use the same one, and they were really, really good. Basically all of them were really, really good. Especially, I feel like, you know, initially, the initial rating on them was different. One of them was so good it had to be Errated, which was Dust. And then, you know, my favorite one is the Brancate one, of course, which is drawn by one of my favorite illustrators, Obari. It was flashy. It wasn't a great mechanic. It was really expensive. It was like, so decks were built literally around them. Some of them were, you literally had to build around them, like Zoa, I'd say. But then you had things like, I guess, Stark that were quite generically useful. But I don't really know where I would want to put it. It kind of adds, like, in terms of hype moments and aura, it kind of goes together with Break Ride and Legion. But in general, in terms of like, as a mechanic, it was kind of whatever. Dust and Ultima saying hello. Hey, Ultima was freaking insane, dude. It's somewhere here. I like the Ultimate Strides because especially Ultima led to some really cool Angel Feather combos that I really enjoyed. Ultima had to be choice restricted, yep. So, and yeah, like, just the distribution of these were really, really bad. The distribution was horrible, and the price was really, really bad. They added to like the expensive argument of the game like crazy. Yeah, I guess Gize does count towards this too, and that's also like hype moments and aura, I guess. Where does this go, man? It's kind of, it's the same, it goes with like Limit Break, Persona Blast, Crossride. It's like, it's an upgraded form of what we were doing until now kind of thing. So it'll go somewhere here. It's like a B-ish. All right, we move on to V. V era is my least favorite era of the game. My locals had, we tried restarting my locals during this era. It felt like a lot of the flashiness of the game got removed until the very end when it kind of came back. And that was kind of cool. But overall, it was a bit of a mixed bag. So they introduced imaginary gifts, which were basically a mechanic that if you rode a grade 3 Vanguard, they would generate a gift. and each clan was distributed between 3 different ones. There was Axel, which would make additional front row rearguard circles, so you had more than 2. And then you had Protect, which was a perfect guard that went to your hand, so you had more than 4 perfect guards per deck. And then you had Force, which let you target any one of your circles and put the force marker on it, and it would give plus 10k to the thing on that circle. Now, initially, you only made one of these per turn, and it was kind of cool. It's like, well, Axel was like, well, I get an extra front row rearguard circle, and it also gets plus 10k whatever goes on the thing too. Force was like, yeah, I guess you get a stronger rearguard column. So if you like call multiple rearguards, like, I don't know, like freaking Royal Paladin or something, well, that thing will also get plus 10k. Very cool. Initially, Protect was the best one because you had extra perfect guards to stall the game with Oracle Think Tank, and that was really good. So initial imaginary gifts were like, they were kind of like an okay idea, I guess. They were kind of decent, but then they got really crazy. They started making decks that made multiple. They started making decks that made 2. They basically started making decks that made multiples, and some of these were, yeah, Luard made 3, right? It's like, the problem was that they kept making more gifts, and this was basically something, it was like Persona Ride has basically been a very strictly once per turn mechanic, but they took this strictly once per turn mechanic and let you do it multiple times per turn, and that's when the power creep of the game started to get kind of crazy, because power is everything in Vanguard, because that's also how you defend and how you attack, right? So that was in Imaginary Gift 1. Initially, how do we rate this? Because Imaginary Gift 2 kind of goes side by side. Do we like split this between first half of Vanguard and second half of Vanguard V? Because first half was boring, but it didn't feel unbalanced, I guess. So it's kind of like around here. I guess I'll just put them together. Basically, down the line, they introduced another type of imaginary gifts. They made Axel 2, Protect 2, and Force 2. Force 2, instead of giving 10k to the thing on the circle, made its base crit 2, which was cool because you could make your Vanguard be permanently 2 crit and gave it really cool pressure for a dimensional place. That was kind of cool. Protect was like a force marker, but it gave 5k power to the thing in that circle, but it made it so that when you intercept with that thing in the circle, it gets plus 10k shield, I think it was, or was it 15? I think it was 10. And then Axel was the craziest one. It made the additional front row circle, only gave 5k power to the thing in that circle, but it let you draw a card. So the thing of generating imaginary gifts is that if you ride a grade 3 again to generate another, imaginary gift, you lose a card from hand. In exchange, Protect got a perfect card, so it didn't lose hand. That was the whole thing of Protect. It was a defensive form of gift. But Axel 2 gave you more attackers because you got another front row circle, and it also gave you a card draw. This was the most broken of them all, I think, and there were so many instances of this being broken. Like Vanquisher also was making 2 Axel circles per turn. That was a fun Axel 2 deck because it was combo based. But they it was like what, Hyuga? Remember like the Hyuga format was pretty insane with multiple. It was like Axel 2, and then was there anything at the very end? I feel like the most obscene decks at the very end were basically the ones spamming Force 1. And then I guess Bluish Flames, yeah. Bluish Flames was the other Axel 2 maker where you had a rear guard that made additional Axel 2 markers. So you were like what? Actually ridiculous. So I don't know, imaginary gifts to me, I feel like V era could not exist for all that matters. V era could not exist for all that matters. The only thing about imaginary gift that I will give as a positive is that they are, yeah, somebody said it in chat, they are the core of premium. Like, this also good and a bad thing because it made it so that premium grade 3s were basically based around V era grade 3s until they made like the history collection strides. But that also made that the D era grade 3s were pretty bad in premium. And I feel like if gifts never existed, maybe the D era grade 3s would have been a little bit better, if I guess. But the problem is that it's a stride based format, so that's what's hard about it. Both imaginary gifts should be F. I don't know. It's not. I just don't like V era in general because I disagree with reboots in general. It's like Duel Masters has lived on for so many years without rebooting. Yu-Gi-Oh has lived on for so many years without rebooting. You know, obviously the D reboot made a lot of good things for the game, but overall it's tough. I think 2 should be an F. Yeah, maybe we'll put 2 in F. I feel like 2 could have not existed. They should have just balanced 1 a bit, like made Axel 1 decks a little better and never made 2. But I liked Force 2, that's the only problem. But whatever. Enough talking about gifts. There's a couple other things that they made during the era. One was draw PGs. Draw PGs turned grade 1 Perfect Guards into draw triggers, so you had more space in the deck to put other cards. And this was a pretty cool thing. The only thing was that it forced you to play draw triggers. As you know, in standard right now, some decks don't really care about draw triggers. And I don't know, it's not a, I don't think it's an S. It's not G-Guard levels of amazing defensive mechanic, but it kind of goes with Perfect Guard to me. I prefer when Perfect Guards are grade 1s, I think. I prefer, but it was cool to have like an era of the game where your deck space felt quite free. So I don't know. It's not defining as a perfect, I don't know. I feel like it's too high to put an A. A is a very elite class here. It's actually, B is the slop tier. B is like the good slop tier. C is the bad slop tier. F is the you shouldn't be here tier. Then 30k crits. These were Sentinel critical triggers that had 30k shield, and they basically took up your Sentinel spot. But the problem was that this was the beginning of 12/16 crit decks becoming quite mainstream, especially with like Kagero. They took PG slots and they promoted pretty unhealthy gameplay with 12 crit decks. Like, I love Gavriel, but that was very much a like what 12/16 crit deck. So yeah, it's like borderline shouldn't have existed levels, but I think we'll allow it in C because I mean they had their function. Orders, you guys know what orders are. We're getting into the D era, but orders were actually introduced in V. So orders are basically spell cards. For me, this is an S. I love orders. Orders were something that I was really happy about when D kind of confirmed that these will continue, and they sort of stayed. I just think it's like Vanguard boomers, myself included, of course, will tell you real Vanguard was when all 50 cards in your deck were all unit cards, right? I met up with one of like the best Shadowverse Evolve players in Japan, and he used to be a Vanguard player back in the day, and we were talking about, we just went to a card shop to look at Evolve stuff, and we stopped at the Vanguard showcase, and he was like, oh my god, Minerva's back in Vanguard. That was like my favorite deck of all time back then when I was like a high schooler. And I was telling him about like how the deck works now, and then he was like, oh, like what card should I pick up if I want to like get back into the game and play Minerva? And I was like, oh, you're gonna want this. Like, I showed him like the order, the one from the Nebula Knights one. He was like, wait, there's spells in the game now? The Vanguard I know didn't have any spells. And I was like, yeah, but it's a cool part of the game now. Like, having things that don't necessarily contribute to being on the board. I think that's the other good thing, is that like Vanguard was always like, well, if your board is full, do you really want to overcall something just to use an effect? Orders are kind of give you that, you know, being able to use an effect. And the fact that, you know, we're in a nation-based system, I also think that the whole nation system should be in here too. But because we're now in a nation system, it makes it so that like orders that are designed for one play style in a nation can be suddenly used in another, right? And that's what makes it really, really cool too. And overall, I like orders a lot. I think the fact that we have 3 different types, I feel like Blitz Order, again, I love Blitz Order. I love Blitz Orders. I wish they weren't once per turn. I always say this. I like set orders too. I just feel like orders added such a cool thing to the game, and I feel like I could not play Vanguard without orders in them now. So orders really feel like one of the coolest mechanics. So I really like it. Then this one might be, I feel like this one is, I am surprised how many people would not think this way, but to me, Ride Deck is S. I understand that it has homogenized the gameplay. This is the big like criticism people have of the Ride Deck, is that, so in case you don't know, the Ride Deck is that you choose 4 cards when building your deck that are your 0, 1, 2, and 3 that you will ride into every single game. People say that Ride Deck has made it so every game is the same, right? Because you always ride the same thing, and the way your deck is built, it's not the same. Back in my day, we had break rides, and you could break right into a Legion, and you could break right into a Cross ride, and you could break right into a Persona ride. It's like, you know, all this kind of stuff, right? And it's like old Vanguard was all about changing the grade 3 and doing different stuff, but now it's all about just like doing the same thing, right? But I think that's not a bad thing. The reason why is that, one, the reason why Rydek is an S that I should explain first and foremost is that this removed being grade stuck. The worst part of Vanguard of all time. In my opinion, worse than the OT is being grade stuck. Literally nothing worse than being grade stuck. And that was, it just felt so bad because if you won a game because your opponent is grade stuck, you don't feel good. And if you're grade stuck and you lose, well, you don't feel good either because you couldn't play the game, right? Nothing felt worse than being grade stuck. And that was just the worst. They just removed that entire part of the game. What Rydek made is that unlike other card games that are like mana based, that it's like, you know, you draw your opening hand and your hand is full of cards that only work in the late game and you have nothing to do early game and you just die. And it's like, well, I couldn't even do what my deck wants to do. The Rydek made it so that Vanguard now, you can always do the bare minimum of what your deck wants to do because you can get to the grade 3. Even if you, for the rest of the game, you only draw triggers and nothing else, you will still be able to do what the grade 3 wants to do. And that means you will still be able to do the bare minimum. And it also opened up deck building. They immediately showcased this with making Bastion and being like, you can now make a deck full of grade 3s and it'll be actually very good, right? It feels like it just added more freedom to deck building. You didn't have to, like, don't forget, before the Rydek was introduced, Vanguard's ratios were like 14 grade 1s, 12 grade 2s, 8 grade 3s. Every single deck that didn't have a way to search for specific grades was 14 to 16 grade 1s, and then you had your 12 grade 2s, 10 to 12 grade 2s, and then like 6 to 8, sometimes 9 or maybe more grade 3s. And so people say like, oh, the Rydek made the game too like homogenized. Well, at least you have freedom in deck building. I love the safety of the Rydek, and I feel like it's just, it added more interesting ideas. It just feels like the Rydek effects are cool for the most part, and they show them off pretty early as well. Yeah, it's like people mentioned Zorga as well. So I feel like Rydek is just, to me, nothing but good. And I don't really mind because the Rydek has homogenized riding, that means that everything else that happens in the game can be the different points of the game, right? That's why early game is so important in the current era of Vanguard. So when people say this criticism of, well, every game is now the same, but it's not, because the way you play the early game will greatly change how the game plays out. And it kind of added this push and pull factor to the game that I think is very interesting. So it's literally, in my opinion, one of the best mechanics in that they've ever added. And it makes recommending Vanguard so much easier compared to like, it's like obviously the OT existing just feels like it took away some of the good of this, but that's part of it. Persona Ride, however, I do not think is as good. Persona Ride, again, we come back to the age-old question, how do we use the extra grade 3s in our deck? Do we discard them for effects? Do we ride over them? Do we ride over them in a different way? Do we, so many writing, so much writing. Do we discard them for costs? Well, let's just find the exact same copy and ride over it. It's kind of, I don't know, it's part of the homogenization. It's kind of like the same argument as ride deck, right? It's like, well, you know, you are now always like trying to make sure that you have a Persona Ride, and that's why, you know, the decks that proc Persona Ride on their own for whatever purpose are so good is because they don't have to draw into it, which is also very good. So it feels like it's not good, it's not bad. It's kind of like Limit Break, I feel like. I kind of see them in a similar way. It exists. It makes it easy to explain to beginners. It's like, what should I do with the extra grade 3 in my hand? It's like, you just keep it and you'll see what happens, right? And it's like whenever I tell someone that's getting back into the game what changed about Vanguard, I tell them about that. Like when I explain what Persona Ride is, it's like, oh, it's just like Break Ride. That's so cool. Like usually like the reaction is pretty good. So it's like they basically homogenize Break Ride. That's kind of what it is. So I don't know. Initially it felt quite crazy. I feel like these days it is one of the reasons why going first is so good. I don't know, maybe it is, I don't know. It feels like it's somewhere here. It's like it's either B or C. I'll review it at the end. We'll put it in C for now. Over Trigger, I'm afraid well, it's a funny comeback mechanic. It's a poorly designed comeback mechanic. Over Trigger is an easy F It's obviously, I don't really care. It's not going anywhere, but I think the over trigger is just poorly designed. And that's like the only thing, is that it should never have been 100 million power. Everything else about the OT I honestly like. I like that it removes itself from the damage when you check it, so it's basically a heal. I like that it has unique effects that are not the same as all the other triggers in your deck, and I like that it gives more shield than in the average trigger, making it feel special. It's just the power. It's just the power is too much, and I mean, they kind of, I don't know, like instead of 100 million, they could have just made it infinity. Like if they're gonna add infinity power with Buddy Fight, they could have just made this infinity as well. So I don't know. We've discussed the OT enough on this channel. I really don't feel like I need to reinstate any points at this point, but it's part of the game's identity. In terms of flashiness and identity, it's here, but in terms of the health for the game, it's kind of here. Do I wish it was completely removed? No, I just wish it was different. I just wish the power was different. Literally, if it wasn't for the power, it'd be here. That's how I'll put it. If OT's power wasn't 100 million, it would be here. But because it is, it's here. That's just how it is. Heal Guardian. Ooh, this is a V era mechanic. Why is it in this column? Well, whatever. One V mechanic slipped in. So Heal Guardian is kind of similar to G Guardian, where these are defensive cards that are in V and Premium that basically are great 3s, but you can guard with them early to either give your Vanguard plus 10k for the turn, or you give -2 critical, was it? To one of the attacking units, I think. I haven't played Premium in a while, so I don't remember. And then the other effect was like, you can, if you don't have any damage, you can give yourself a damage or something like that. So Heal Guardians were good. This made, doesn't feel like an identity thing. God, I almost, V is so full, dude. Put so much stuff in V. It's a good mechanic though. Heal Guardians, I feel like it's an A mechanic. It gave defensive power, and it made V, especially the very end of V, feel very much more back and forth, because now you had ways to actually like control the early game. And in Premium, I mean, they're obviously very, very, you know, impactful cards too. Now, these are not in Standard though, so Standard players might not know what a Heal Guardian is. So that's just why I wanted to explain it. Then we have our last 6 mechanics here. So Stride Crest. So these are, of course, the Stride decks in Standard. They have crests that, the crest itself should have been a mechanic here too. I'm surprised that's not here either. So I don't know if I want to put this as crests in general, because I think crests in general are kind of okay, but Stride crests specifically gave plus 5k to your front row for every face-up card in your G zone in exchange for having Persona Ride. Initially, this was so overpowered, it was like somewhere here. In Standard, obviously, it makes the Stride decks have power scaling, but it's kind of boring. Like, the problem with the Stride Crest is like, they were like, well, we can't give Persona Ride to Stride decks because we want people to be able to use their old cards. So let's make this quasi Persona Ride instead. That ended up being broken in Premium. So, and then they basically banned them all. So it just feels like poorly, like by banning them all, they basically said this shouldn't have existed in the first place, in Premium at least. But in Standard is a necessary evil, I guess. Well, it's not even evil in Standard, except for like the very first time when Jet came out. So, but to me, it's just boring. That's the problem with this. Just kind of boring. So it's just power gain, and like it's kind of same as Persona Ride, I guess. So we'll kind of put it there. Regulus piece. I am a fan of Ace specs from Pokemon, and that's what Regulus pieces are. It's a once per deck card that has a powerful effect, much like an OT. It's like a better designed OT. It doesn't stop the game when you see it. It just does a strong thing once per game. I think they're good. I don't think it's S tier levels of amazing, because they're also usually orders. Oh, well, they're basically always orders. And they're usually like very impactful. It's like, yeah, it's like if they redesigned the OT essentially. They're very powerful. Some are better than others, but then some of them are very much designed for specific decks, and overall they've been designing them in a really good way. I overall like once per deck based cards because it allows because I like comeback cards, and usually the once per deck cards are designed as comeback cards. And so I think Regulus piece for that reason is quite cool. So I like Regulus pieces. I hope they keep making more of them. They've made some very good ones so far. And the best part is that they're not too good. Not like the Regulus pieces are all kind of balanced in a way that they all feel quite similarly. Like there's a few, obviously like Twin Cast is more generically usable because shield is so good, right? Yum, yum, yum. And Fire Regulus is really good because top 5 to call something is very good too. But then there's other things where it's like, well, this deck doesn't have any counter charge. Let's use the one that gives you counter charge kind of thing, right? So I do think overall comeback cards are cool and Regulus piece is kind of like that. Energy. So this of course was introduced a year and a half ago. It's a new resource system in Vanguard that is used to pay for costs. At the time of recording this, they just revealed a new Liel and she pays 4 energy for something that other decks do for 3 energy and they do more for that cost. So energy is the first ever resource in Vanguard other than Soul that your opponent doesn't have a say in. So, you know, or I guess in terms of blast, it's just Soul really, because damage your opponent has a say in, Soul they don't, but energy is also one that your opponent technically doesn't get a chance to deny. You can only just misuse it yourself and not have enough for it. Overall, it hasn't, there's nothing, I think Heart Luru is pushing what you should be able to do with energy, because paying 3 energy to call 4 things is quite insane. Considering that, you know, Shoujo Doji was also considered very good for paying 3 energy to, you know, get rid of 2 of your opponent's things and also set up superior calls for yourself. So it's a new resource. It's only been around for a year and a half. For now, it's been quite good. Either A or B, I guess. I don't feel like it's, I'm more on the A side. It's kind of like, again, it's like Heal Guardian where it's a good game mechanic overall. Just don't make it too cheap. Just don't like misdesign it. That's the only thing. Because once you misdesign it once, then you either ban that card or then you design everything with that same design and then it becomes power creep. So just don't overdo it. Divine Skill. You might know this, I'm a big fan of Divine Skills. I actually really like. Divine Skills are a once per game mechanic. You might notice something. I like once per game things. I like Divine Skills, but not all Divine Skills. I think the Divine Skills that happen at certain stages of the game are the coolest, especially if your opponent has a say in them. I really like when original Varga only worked when your opponent is at 4 damage. Because it felt like this kind of like push and pull. I like Blangmire because you can always kind of bluff to your opponent if you're going to use it or not. It adds this really cool dynamic to the game. I like Rezels too because it's like initially it felt like the splashable generic divine skill that you can put in other decks to prevent deck out, right? Overall, I feel like they could still be doing more with divine skill. We just got a new one today for the first time in ages. And I really feel like we could still be getting more interesting divine skills. And I still hope we do down the line, but I like divine skills. I think once per game stuff is cool as long as it's balanced well. And like some of the divine skills were exactly the way that I would want them to be designed. Some of them are kind of whatever. Like Levy Dress is very much just like, well, if you can use it, you should use it. Okay. You know, so some of them are kind of whatever. I think some of them are made as goalposts, like Liel Odium is a goal, right? It's like the whole purpose of the game when you play this deck is to use a divine skill and win, right? So I like that a lot. So is Blangmire, I guess, as well. Yeah, there's also Olden, I guess. It was like, huh? Overall, I like divine skill, especially thematically. It's cool. And then we're finally down to the last two. We have the Ace units, which are the brand new mechanic introduced. Also a once per deck. Oh my god, he loves his once per deck stuff. But these are once per deck units that are grade 2s with no shield that once per game can energy blast 3 to do a powerful effect. They're okay. These are not as, I was really excited initially, but they're kind of just fine. I don't know. It's Regulus pieces units, but they've not done enough with them. And I really hope that's not all we have so far. I really hope there's more where that came from. I don't know. It feels more like I like Regulus piece more because again, it's an order. I like orders, and they have both defensive and offensive and defensive Regulus pieces. Whereas Ace unit is just one unit that just does one thing. Some of them aren't even necessarily like the Dragon Empire one is cool because it's like a removal, but then they feel like they're really good if you see them early. And then in some decks, the worst part is Regulus piece you want to put into a deck no matter what. But Ace unit is like, well, if your deck uses 3 to 6 energy every turn, well, you're not going to have the energy for the Ace unit then, are you? right? And that just makes it a problem, right? It's like, that's the kind of the problem with Youthberg, right? Youthberg uses a lot of energy going first. If you go first, you don't have the energy to use the ace unit. So it just feels kind of, I don't know. I don't know if 3 energy was the right play. Then finally we have D-Legion. It's a nerfed version of Legion. So this is the Legion that's come back to standard. It's sad, dude. This is such an over nerf. This is the only alternative to Persona Ride in standard, by the way. So Persona Ride literally is, you either play a deck with Persona or you play a deck with D-Legion right now, or Stride. That's the other alternative. But outside of Strides, it's the only new alternative, and it just feels over restricted. Your opponent has to be on grade 3 to use it. You can only put 2 triggers back, and like especially Daikaiser has even more restrictions. He's the only D-Legion so far outside of Bravern, and it just feels over restricted. I'm sure they'll make more down the line. I'm sure they'll make a bluish flame one. It'll be like decent or something, but it just feels like they took some of the flavor away from Legion because they didn't want to make them, like they were scared of making the mistakes of the past, which I understand, but I feel like they were a little bit too strict with it. So before we end, is there anything to reshuffle? Yeah, Ride Chain, Persona Blast, Cross Ride. This is like a pretty good, we'll put Limit Break next. We can kind of reorganize this. I put Regulus Piece at the top of A. I really like Regulus Pieces. And Perfect Guard I think is a good placement. Break Ride I rate pretty highly too, and then these two are like just cool gameplay things that are just nice in general, both of them. And then for S, Forerunner, is it really the best? I think Stride, if I had to choose the best mechanic of all, probably would give it to Stride, then G-Guard, then Orders, now probably then Ride Deck, then Order, then Forerunner, then Divine Skill. I feel like it's kind of like this. I like, you know, this is my G nostalgia head coming back a little bit, but I feel like Ride Deck I would normally put, like, it's because we had that whole discussion, I guess. Like, I mean, obviously Stride also had its negatives in terms of like grade 2 game and stuff, but I feel like these 3 are very much up there as well. So that's my list. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check out some of the other tier list content I've done, such as that one time where I ranked all of the anime seasons, as well as that one time where I ranked all of the Dragonic Overlords. With that, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.